Welcome to a story of love that changed everything. A tale of two hearts finding their way home when they did not even know they were lost. The old bell above the door of the last page bookshop had not chimed in over an hour. Elara Vance listened to the silence, a sound that had become more familiar and less welcome with each passing week. It was a heavy quiet, thick with the scent of aging paper, brewed coffee, and the lavender polish she used on the mahogany shelves. Outside, a relentless autumn rain lashed against the large bay window, turning the charming cobblestone street of Port Blossom into a watercolour painting left out in a storm. The world was a blur of grey and rushing water. She ran a hand over the worn cover of a first edition she was cataloguing, the embossed title a faint ghost beneath her fingertips. This shop was her inheritance, her sanctuary, and her gilded cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every dusty sunbeam that sliced through the tall shelves, was a memory of her grandfather. He had built this place from nothing, a haven for words and wanderers. Now, it was her responsibility to keep it from becoming a memory itself. A stack of unpaid invoices sat beside her on the checkout counter, a stark white monument to her mounting anxiety. Foot traffic was down. Online retailers were titans she could not possibly fight, and the roof had developed a new, worryingly melodic drip near the poetry section. She sighed, pushing a stray strand of chestnut hair from her face. At 28, she felt older, weighed down by a legacy that was beginning to feel more like an anchor than a sail. Her grandfather had always said the shop was magic, that the right book would always find the right person at the right time. Lately, Elara felt the magic was running thin. The people were not coming, so the books just sat, their stories waiting in the quiet dark. She loved them, every single one. She loved the crisp snap of a new spine and the gentle sigh of an old one. She loved the worlds they held, but love, she was discovering, did not pay the electricity bill. The rain suddenly intensified, hammering against the glass with a percussive fury. The lights flickered once, twice, then held steady. Elara held her breath until they did, her shoulders slumping in relief. A power outage was the last thing she needed. She was about to give up on the day, to flip the brass open sign to closed and surrender to a cup of tea and her own worries, when the bell finally, blessedly, chimed. The sound was so abrupt in the oppressive silence that she flinched. A man stood just inside the doorway, shaking a torrent of water from a dark jacket, a small puddle already forming at his feet on the welcome mat. He ran a hand through his rain-slicked hair, pushing it back from his forehead. "Sorry about the floor," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble that seemed to settle comfortably into the quiet spaces of the shop. "Do not worry," Elara managed, finding her professional smile. "The floor has seen worse. On days like this, I am just glad to see anyone walk through that door." He looked up, and for the first time their eyes met. His were the colour of sea glass, a surprising shade of green-blue that held a hint of weariness, but also a spark of curiosity. He was tall, with the lean build of someone who spent more time moving than sitting still. His face was all angles and planes, softened slightly by a day's worth of stubble. He looked like he did not belong in Port Blossom. He looked like a traveller, someone who was just passing through. Those were the kind of people who rarely bought books. They did not have room for the weight. "It is quite a storm," he commented, his gaze drifting from her to the cosy interior of the shop. He seemed to take it all in at once, the towering shelves that reached for the tin ceiling, the ladder on its rolling track, the worn armchairs tucked into a reading nook by a cold fireplace. This place is incredible. It feels real. It is real, Elara confirmed with a small, wry smile. The leaky roof and the overdue bills are very real. The words slipped out before she could stop them. A crack in her carefully maintained composure, a flicker of surprise, then empathy, crossed his face. He did not offer a platitude or a dismissive chuckle. He just nodded slowly, as if she had said something profound. The real places are always the ones that have to fight the hardest to stick around. He moved further into the shop, his footsteps soft on the aged wooden floor. He walked with an easy grace, his hands in the pockets of his jeans as he scanned the spines of books, his head tilted. "Are you looking for anything in particular?" Elara asked, her standard customer service question feeling strangely inadequate. He turned his head slightly, a smile touching the corner of his mouth. "I do not know. I never know until I find it." He paused in front of the travel section, his fingers ghosting over a collection of adventure narratives. "Mostly, I was just looking for a place to get out of the rain." "The rain is good for business," Elara said, trying to steer the conversation back to safer, more transactional ground. "It forces people to slow down." "Does it?" he asked, turning to face her fully. He leaned a shoulder against the bookshelf. "Or does it just make them hurry to get where they are going?" The question hung in the air between them. It was more than a question about the weather. She felt a strange pull, a current of connection that was as unexpected as his arrival. She, who was so good with words, suddenly found herself without any. "I suppose it depends on the person," she finally said. He nodded again, that slow, considering gesture. "I am Liam, by the way. Elara." "Elara," he repeated, and the way he said her name, soft and low, made it sound like something precious. "Well, Elara, your shop is a fine place to wait out a storm." He continued his slow exploration, and Elara found herself watching him. He moved with a quiet reverence, as if he understood that a bookshop was a kind of church. He did not pull books out haphazardly. He had read a spine, sometimes two, before carefully selecting one, holding it as if weighing its contents. She went back to her cataloguing, but her focus was shot. Her awareness was entirely consumed by the silent, rain-dampened stranger moving through her quiet world. He made his way toward the back of the store, near the history and cartography section, her grandfather's favourite. It was the dustiest, most neglected part of the shop, filled with oversized atlases and obscure historical accounts that no one ever looked at. As he rounded the corner of a towering shelf, his elbow caught the edge of a carefully constructed pillar of books she had been meaning to reshelve all morning. The collapse was slow at first, then rapid. A cascade of hardcovers tumbled to the floor with a series of loud, echoing thuds that made them both jump. One of them, a heavy tome on nautical history, landed perilously close to his foot. "Oh, I am so sorry," he said, rushing forward, his face a mask of mortification. He knelt down, gathering the fallen soldiers. "It is fine." "It is my fault," Elara insisted, hurrying out from behind the counter. "I should not have stacked them there. It was a booby trap waiting to happen." They both knelt on the floor. surrounded by a fan of open pages and splayed spines. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same book, a biography of a forgotten explorer. A tiny jolt, a spark of warmth, shot up Elara's arm. She pulled her hand back as if burned. "I really am sorry," Liam said again, his sea-glass eyes sincere. "I am a bit of a bull in a china shop today." "This is not a china shop," Elara said, her voice softer than she intended. "It is a bookshop. Books are tougher than they look. They are meant to be dropped, dog-eared, and loved until they fall apart." He smiled, a genuine, heart-stopping smile that lit up his entire face. "I like that." As they gathered the last of the books, Liam picked up a slim, leather-bound volume. It was an old collection of maps, not of real places, but of fantastical ones from literature. "My grandfather loved this one," she said, her voice filled with a sudden, sharp nostalgia. "He always said you could get just as lost in a good map as you could in a good story." Liam opened it carefully. The pages were filled with intricate, hand-drawn maps of places like Middle-earth, Narnia, and the 100-Acre Wood. "He was a smart man," Liam said, tracing the route to the lonely mountain with his finger. "I am a photographer. I travel a lot. I spend most of my life looking at real maps, trying to find a new place to see. But sometimes I think these are the more important ones." "Why?" The question was quiet, earnest. He looked up from the book, his gaze meeting hers over the colourful ink of imaginary lands. "Because they remind you that the most important journeys are not always about the miles you travel." And there it was again. That feeling. He saw things. He did not just look. He saw the heart of her shop, the meaning behind a dusty old book of maps. He saw a truth she had been too busy and too worried to remember herself. Would you like a cup of coffee?" she offered, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Or tea? I have an electric kettle. It is nothing fancy, but it is hot." His smile softened. "I would love a cup of coffee. Thank you." She led him back to the counter, her heart beating a little faster than it should. She felt flustered, strangely hopeful. While she busied herself with the kettle and 2 mismatched mugs, he leaned against the counter, holding the book of maps. "So, you are a photographer?" she asked, trying to fill the silence. "What do you take pictures of?" "Anything that tells a story," he said simply. "Landscapes, mostly. Old buildings. Sometimes people, but only when they do not know I am looking. A person's face is different when they think no one is watching." It was an intimate thought, and it made her feel suddenly self-conscious. She wondered what her own face looked like when she thought no one was watching. Tired, probably. Worried. She handed him a steaming mug, their fingers brushing again. This time she did not pull away. "So what brings you to Port Blossom?" "It is not exactly on the way to anywhere. I am on my way up the coast. I heard this was a good place to see the storm roll in over the ocean," he explained, cradling the warm mug in his hands. I was not disappointed. "Most people try to avoid the storms," she said. "Most people miss the best light," he countered. "The light is always best right after a storm breaks." They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping their coffee, as the rain continued its relentless drumming on the roof. The shop felt different with him in it. It felt less empty, less quiet. It felt alive. "How long have you had this place?" he asked gently. "It was my grandfather's. He passed away 2 years ago, and I inherited it," she explained. "I grew up in here, every summer, every holiday. He taught me how to read using the picture books from that bottom shelf over there." She pointed to a low shelf filled with colourful, well-loved children's stories. "It has always been my favourite place in the world." "But it is a struggle now," he stated. It was not a question. She just nodded, looking down into her coffee. There was no point in denying it. He seemed to see it anyway. "I am sorry," he said. "It is okay," she lied, forcing a bright smile. "Every small business has its ups and downs." Before he could respond, the bell chimed again. This time, it was Mrs. Gable from the bakery next door, a whirlwind of flour-dusted energy and cheerful chatter, holding a small paper bag. "Elara, dear, I saw you had a customer and thought you both might need a little something to warm you up on a day like this," she said, her eyes twinkling as she took in the scene. Elara and the handsome stranger were sharing coffee at the counter. Mrs. Gable missed nothing. Fresh apple turnovers. Still warm. "Oh, Mrs. Gable, you did not have to," Elara protested, though she was touched by the gesture. "Nonsense. The rain makes me sentimental." She placed the bag on the counter and then gave Liam a thorough but friendly once-over. "You are not from around here." Liam smiled. "Is it that obvious?" Liam. "Just passing through." "Martha Gable. I own the rolling pin next door," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "Well, Liam, you have found the cosiest spot in town to hide from the weather. Elara keeps the best company." She winked at Elara, a mischievous glint in her eye. "You be sure to buy a book before you leave. This place runs on passion and paper, but the bank, unfortunately, prefers cash." With that, she bustled out as quickly as she had come in, leaving the scent of cinnamon and sugar in her wake, and Elara with a fierce blush creeping up her neck. Liam chuckled softly. "She seems nice." "She is the town's crier, mayor and patron saint all rolled into one," Elara said, shaking her head with affection. "And she is not subtle." He reached into the bag and pulled out a turnover, breaking it in half and offering a piece to her. The pastry was warm and flaky, the apple filling sweet and spiced perfectly. They ate in a comfortable, easy silence, the only sounds the rain and the soft turning of a page as Liam occasionally glanced down at the book of maps still in his hand. The storm began to ease. The furious drumming on the roof softened to a gentle patter, and a watery grey light began to filter through the front window. The world outside was coming back into focus. "The light is changing," Liam said, his voice quiet. He drained the last of his coffee. "I should probably go and try to catch it." A sudden, sharp pang of disappointment hit Elara. Of course, he had to leave. He was a traveller. He was just passing through. She had known that from the moment he walked in. "Right," she said, forcing her professional smile back into place. "Well, thank you for the company. Thank you for the coffee and the turnover." He walked to the front of the shop, but he did not head for the door. Instead, he came back to the counter and placed the book of maps on its surface. "I would like to buy this." Elara stared at the book, then at him, Are you sure? It is just old drawings. It is a reminder, he said, his sea glass eyes meeting hers, of the most important journeys. He pulled a worn leather wallet from his back pocket and paid for the book in cash, insisting she keep the change. She slid the book into a simple paper bag, her movements slow. She did not want him to go. The silence was going to be so much louder after he left. He took the bag, his fingers brushing hers one last time. It was really nice to meet you, Elara. You too, Liam. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the handle. He turned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. I will be in town for a few days. The light here, it is something special. I would like to try and capture it. Elara's heart gave a hopeful little leap. Oh, okay. Maybe I will stop by again, he said. It was half a statement, half a question. I would like that, she said, and this time her smile was completely genuine. He gave her one last lingering look, then opened the door. The little bell chimed its farewell, and he was gone, stepping out into the damp, clean air of a world washed new by the storm. Elara stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. The shop was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was a silence filled with possibility, with the echo of his voice and the memory of his smile. She walked to the window and watched him walk down the street, his tall frame disappearing into the soft post-storm mist. For the first time in a very long time, she felt a flicker of the old magic her grandfather used to talk about. Maybe, just maybe, the right person could walk into your life at exactly the right time too. The morning after the storm was crystalline. The rain had scrubbed the air clean, and the early sun cast long, sharp shadows down the cobblestone street. Port Blossom seemed to sparkle, every brick and window pane gleaming. Elara opened the shop feeling a lightness that had been absent for months. It was a fragile optimism, delicate as a spider's web, but it was there. She found herself humming as she brewed her morning coffee, the scent mingling with the familiar fragrance of old paper. She kept glancing at the door, at the little brass bell, telling herself she was not waiting for anyone in particular. It was just a beautiful day, and beautiful days always made her hopeful. She was rearranging a display of new fiction, the bright, glossy covers a stark contrast to the rest of the shop's muted tones, when the bell chimed. Her heart did a little flip-flop that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She looked up, and there he was. Liam stood in the doorway, backlit by the brilliant morning sun. He was not the same rain-dampened stranger from the day before. He wore a simple grey t-shirt and jeans, a camera with a formidable-looking lens slung over his shoulder. The weariness she had seen in his eyes was gone, replaced by a focused energy. The sea glass green of his irises seemed to catch and hold the morning light. I see the light is good today, Elara said, her voice steadier than she felt. A slow smile spread across his face. It is perfect. I told you it would be. He stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. The shop immediately felt smaller, more charged with his presence. I was just walking the waterfront, but I remembered you said you had coffee that was better than nothing fancy. I might have undersold it, she admitted, a smile playing on her own lips. It is a special blend from a roaster a few towns over. It is my one non-book-related indulgence. In that case, I would be a fool not to try it. She moved behind the counter, her hands busy with the familiar ritual of grinding beans and pouring water. It gave her something to focus on other than the way he was looking at her. his gaze curious and direct. He did not browse the shelves this time. He leaned against the counter, his hip resting against the worn wood, and watched her. "Did you find any good light to capture this morning?" she asked. "A few spots," he said. "The old fishing boats, down at the pier, the way the sun hits the spray coming off the rocks by the lighthouse. This town has character." "It is quiet," she said. "Most people who come here are looking for that." "Quiet is good," he replied. "Quiet places have the loudest stories. You just have to get close enough to hear them." He gestured with his head toward her. "Like this place." She poured the steaming coffee into 2 mugs, the same mismatched pair as yesterday, and slid one across the counter to him. "Well, you are welcome to listen." He took a sip of the coffee, his eyes closing for a moment in appreciation. "Okay, you were right. This is definitely nothing fancy. This is exceptional. Do not tell Mrs. Gable at the bakery. She thinks her coffee is the best in town, and I do not have the heart to argue." "Your secret is safe with me," he said, his smile warming her from the inside out. They fell into an easy silence, the kind that feels comfortable rather than awkward. It was as if they had known each other for longer than a single rainy afternoon. "So," she began, leaning her elbows on the counter, feeling bolder than usual. "Show me. What does the world look like through your lens?" His expression shifted, a flicker of surprise followed by a pleased warmth. "Are you sure? Most people's eyes glaze over when a photographer starts talking about f-stops and composition. I spend my entire life surrounded by other people's stories," she said. "I would like to see some of yours." He seemed to consider her for a long moment, then he nodded. He carefully unslung his camera and set it on the counter. After a few clicks of a dial, he turned the small screen towards her. The first image was of a desert, the sand dunes glowing orange under a setting sun. The scale was immense and awe-inspiring. The next was a black and white shot of an ancient gnarled tree, its branches like twisted limbs reaching for a stormy sky. Then came a series of portraits, all candid, just as he had described. An old man in a European market, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and laughter. A child chasing pigeons in a sun-drenched plaza. Each photo was saturated with feeling. He did not just capture images, he captured moments and emotions. He captured the stories she so loved to read. "These are breathtaking, Liam," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She looked up from the screen to find him watching her, his expression open and unguarded. "I just take the pictures," he said with a shrug, though his eyes told her he was pleased by her reaction. "The world does all the heavy lifting." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You see it. You see the story, like you said. Anyone can point a camera at a sunset, but you captured the loneliness of it, and the hope." He turned the camera back around, his fingers gently brushing against hers as he did. "I have been on the road for a long time," he said, his voice softer now. "For a while, I thought I was just running from a life I did not want, a future that felt all planned out for me by someone else." "What changed?" she asked, her own story of being tied to a legacy feeling suddenly acutely relevant. "I realized I was not running from something. I was searching for something." He looked around the shop, at the floor-to-ceiling shelves, the comfortable chairs, the faint motes of dust dancing in the sunbeams. I am looking for the real places, the ones that are holding on, the ones with history etched into them. Like this shop. Elara felt a lump form in her throat. He understood. He truly understood what this place meant, not just to her, but in the grander scheme of things. He knew that it was not just a failing business, it was a bastion against a world that was becoming increasingly sterile and uniform. It is getting harder and harder to hold on, she confessed, the words quiet but heavy with truth. Sometimes I feel like I am the only one left who cares about this. She gestured vaguely at the books, the history, the quiet magic of the room. You are not, he said, his voice firm. You are just the one standing on the front lines. Just then, the mail slot in the front door clattered open and shut, and a small stack of envelopes fell onto the welcome mat. It was a familiar sound, one that usually brought a fresh wave of anxiety. Bills, flyers, and the occasional postcard from a tourist who had passed through months ago. Duty calls, Elara said, trying for a light tone as she walked to the door to retrieve the mail. As she bent down, she saw it. A crisp cream-coloured envelope with a stark red "Final Notice" stamped in the corner. Her stomach plummeted. It was from the county tax office. She had been trying to get on a payment plan, trying to scrape enough together, but sales had been so slow. She straightened up, her fingers suddenly cold on the envelope. She tried to keep her expression neutral as she walked back to the counter, shuffling the threatening letter to the bottom of the small pile. But he saw it. Of course, he saw it. His perceptive gaze missed nothing. Bad news? He asked gently. She forced a smile that felt brittle. Just the usual. A nail and bills. The thrilling life of a small business owner. She started sorting the mail, her hands trembling slightly. She put a flyer for a pizza place in the bin, set aside a postcard, and then was left with the single, terrifying envelope. She placed it face down on the counter, as if hiding the words could make them go away. Liam did not press. He simply stood there, his presence a quiet, steady support. He took another sip of his coffee, giving her a moment to compose herself. My grandfather never worried about money, she said, the words spilling out of her as she stared at the offending envelope. He always said the shop provided what was needed. He had this unshakable faith that if you put something good into the world would take care of you. Her laugh was short and humorless. I think the world has changed since his time. Maybe, Liam said. Or maybe it just needs to be reminded of what is good. He paused, then set his mug down on the counter with a soft click. Listen. I was going to head out to the old abandoned boatyard east of town. The way the wood on those wrecks has weathered, I think it could be interesting. I could use a second set of eyes, someone who knows the local stories. Come with me. The invitation was so unexpected it took her breath away. Leave the shop. In the middle of the day. It was irresponsible. She had invoices to file, inventory to log, a tax bill to panic over. It was the last thing she should do, and it was the only thing she wanted to do. She wanted to escape the suffocating weight of the shop, if only for an hour. She wanted to be out in the clean, sunlit air with this man who saw the world in stories and light. She wanted to feel like the person in his photographs, someone living a moment, not just enduring it. I cannot just close the shop, she said, the protest sounding weak even to her own ears. You have a sign, do not you? He countered with a gentle smile. one that says closed on the other side. She looked around the quiet, empty store. The invoices were not going anywhere. The tax bill would still be there when she got back. But the light, the perfect post-storm light, would not last forever. Neither would his offer. "Okay," she said, the word a sudden, decisive breath of air. "Yes. Okay." A wide, brilliant grin broke across his face, and Elara felt her own spirits lift in response. It was a reckless, foolish decision, and it felt wonderful. She grabbed her jacket from the hook in the back room and found the well-worn will return clock sign her grandfather had used for decades. She turned the hands to an hour from now, a promise to the universe and any potential customers that she was still responsible, still the proprietor of the last page. As she flipped the sign in the window and locked the front door behind them, the little bell chimed, a sound not of arrival or departure this time, but of a temporary, thrilling escape. Stepping out onto the sun-drenched street beside Liam, Elara pushed the thought of the cream-coloured envelope from her mind. For the next hour, she would not be the worried shopkeeper struggling to keep her legacy afloat. She would just be Elara. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like more than enough. The boatyard was a graveyard of dreams. It lay in a small, forgotten cove, a 10-minute walk from the tidy, cheerful storefronts of Port Blossom's main street. Here, the coast was wilder. The air smelled sharply of salt, brine, and the damp, earthy scent of decay. Skeletal remains of fishing trawlers and pleasure cruisers lay half sunk in the mud, their hulls bleached bone white by the sun and salt. They listed at odd angles, like fallen giants in a long-lost battle against the sea. For Elara, it had always been a melancholy place, a reminder of failure. But walking beside Liam, she saw it through his eyes. It was not just an ending, it was a gallery of stories. "Incredible, is not it?" Liam said, his voice low, with something that sounded like reverence. He stopped at the edge of the cove, his camera already in his hand, his eyes scanning the scene, drinking it in. "I suppose," Elara said, pulling her jacket a little tighter. "I have always found it a bit sad." "Sad is part of the story," he replied, not looking at her, his focus entirely on the landscape. "Look at that one." He pointed with his chin towards a large beached trawler, its name, the North Star, still faintly visible in peeling blue paint on its bow. Imagine the places it has been, the storms it weathered, the sunrises it saw. It is not just a wreck, it is a history book. He started to move, his steps sure-footed on the pebbled shore. Elara followed, her initial hesitation giving way to a burgeoning curiosity. She had lived here her whole life and had never once thought to look at this place with anything other than a sense of pity. Liam moved like a predator, all grace and coiled energy. He crouched low to shoot the way a rope curled like a dead snake on a warped deck, then stood on a half-submerged rock to capture the pattern of barnacles on a rudder. He was completely absorbed, in his element. Elara felt a strange sense of displacement. In the shop, she was the expert, the curator. Here, she was just an observer. She watched him, fascinated by the intensity of his concentration. His brow furrowed slightly as he framed a shot, his lips pursed in thought. He was creating, right here in front of her, finding beauty in the brokenness she had always dismissed. He seemed to sense her watching him. He lowered his camera and turned to her, a faint smile on his face. "Sorry, I get lost when I am working." Do not be, she said quickly. It is amazing to watch. You look at the world, and you really see it. It is the only way I know how to look, he said. He started walking again, slower this time, matching his pace to hers. He gestured toward a smaller boat, a simple sailing vessel that had been stripped of its mast and rigging. What do you think its story is? The question was genuine. He was not testing her. He was inviting her in. She looked at the boat, trying to see it as he would. I think it belonged to a young couple, she said, the story coming to her as she spoke. They saved for years to buy it. They spent their weekends sailing up the coast, just the two of them. They were going to sail around the world one day. But life got in the way. A baby. A mortgage. The boat just sat here, waiting for a tomorrow that never came. Liam was silent for a long moment, his gaze on the boat. Yeah, he said softly. I can see that. He raised his camera and took a picture, not of the whole boat, but of the empty cleat on its side, a silent, patient testament to a journey never taken. The shot was infused with the story she had just told. He had heard her, and he had translated her words into light and shadow. A powerful, intimate connection flowed between them in that moment. It was more than agreement. It was a shared understanding. What about you? She asked, feeling emboldened. Why do you travel so much? What is the story you are looking for? He stopped walking and leaned against the salt-sprayed hull of a larger wreck, crossing his arms over his chest. He stared out at the water, which was a placid, brilliant blue now that the sun was high in the sky. I told you I was running from a life someone else had planned for me, he began, his voice thoughtful. My father is a lawyer. His father was a lawyer. The path was all paved for me. Good university, law school, a corner office with my name on the door. That sounds safe, Elara said. Comfortable. It was a cage, he said, the words sharp with feeling. A beautiful, well-appointed cage. I tried, for a while. I went to college, studied political science. I felt like I was suffocating every single day. I would look out the window of the lecture hall and just want to be out there. He gestured to the open horizon. So one day, during my final year, I just left. I packed a bag, took the money I had saved, bought my first real camera, and got in my car. I have been out there ever since. Your family must have been upset, she said, trying to imagine the courage it would take to do something so drastic. A shadow passed over his face. That is an understatement. My father and I have not spoken in years. He thinks I am wasting my life, chasing shadows. You are not chasing shadows, Elara said fiercely, surprising herself with her own conviction. You are capturing light. There is a difference. His eyes met hers, and the gratitude in them was so profound it made her breath catch in her throat. Thank you for that, he said. He pushed off from the hull and took a step closer to her. The space between them shrank, suddenly charged with an unspoken energy. Most people do not get it. I get it, she said, her voice soft. My grandfather, he got it. He used to say that some people are born to build roots, and others are born to grow wings. He said the world needs both. He sounds like he was a good man, Liam said. He was, she whispered, a wave of grief and love washing over her. But it is hard trying to be the roots when you feel like the whole tree is about to fall over. The words were out before she could stop them, a raw admission of the fear that was her constant companion. He did not offer empty platitudes. He did not say, "I am sure it will be fine." He just looked at her with that unnerving perception. "Roots are strongest under pressure," he said quietly. "That is what holds them in the ground." He reached out, not to touch her, but to point at something just behind her. "Look at this." She turned. He was indicating a small, almost hidden detail on the hull of the boat he had been leaning against. A series of names had been carved into the wood, surrounded by a crudely drawn heart. James plus Sarah, 1987. Below it, another set of names. Ben plus Chloe, 2005. It was a living history, a secret conversation with the past. "It is a landmark," she breathed, running her fingers gently over the carved letters. "A wishing tree." "See," he said, his voice just behind her ear, warm and low. "Stories everywhere. Even the wrecks have love stories." She was intensely aware of his closeness. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap mixed with the salt air. She turned her head slightly, and her cheek almost brushed his shoulder. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. This was foolish. She was out here with a stranger, a man who would be gone in a few days, while her life was crumbling back at the shop. But her body did not care about logic. It only cared about the magnetic pull between them, the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. Liam seemed to feel it too. The playful, artistic energy was gone, replaced by something deeper, more serious. He did not move away. His sea glass eyes searched hers, a question in them he did not dare ask. Elara's gaze dropped to his lips. The moment stretched, taut and shimmering like the air above a hot road. The world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of them, surrounded by the ghosts of old boats and the sound of the gently lapping tide. Then he blinked, and the spell was broken. He took a small step back, clearing his throat and raising his camera again, as if using it as a shield. "The light is really good on that peeling paint," he said, his voice a little strained. Elara turned away, her cheeks burning. She felt both relieved and intensely disappointed. He walked a little further down the beach, needing to put some distance between them, to let her racing pulse slow down. She stopped and stared out at the horizon, wrapping her arms around herself. What was she doing? What was she thinking? A few moments later, she heard the soft click of his camera's shutter. She did not turn around. She just kept looking at the sea, at the endless expanse of blue that promised a world so much bigger than her own worries. Another click. "What are you doing?" she asked, without turning. "I am capturing a story," he said. His voice was closer now. "I am not a story," she said, a hint of her old weariness creeping back in. "I am just a person staring at the ocean." "Exactly." She finally turned to face him. He was standing about 10 feet away, the camera held loosely in his hands. He had a serious, focused expression on his face, the same one he had when studying the wrecked boats. "May I?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Just a few more, the way the sun is hitting your hair." She should have said no. She should have been self-conscious, should have hidden from the intrusive lens. But she did not. She trusted him. She trusted his eye. She trusted that he would see what he was looking for. Not a posed smile, but something real. So she just nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. She turned back to the sea, and she forgot he was there. She let the sun warm her face and the breeze tug at her hair. She thought about her grandfather, about the tax bill on the counter, about the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of standing so close to Liam. She let all the feelings wash over her, not trying to hide or suppress any of them. She just was. She heard the shutter click several more times, a quiet, rhythmic sound that was somehow not an intrusion, but a validation. He was capturing this moment, this strange, sunlit hour of escape. He was making it permanent. When the clicking stopped, she turned back. He was looking down at the screen on his camera, a slow, soft smile spreading across his face. "Okay," he said, his voice husky. "I think I got it." "Got what?" she asked, walking towards him. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then turned the screen so she could see. It was not a picture of a smiling pretty girl on a beach. It was a picture of her. Her profile was turned to the camera, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The wind had caught a few strands of her chestnut hair, whipping them across her cheek. There was a faint, wistful line to her mouth, but her expression was not sad. It was resolute, strong. There was a depth in her eyes that spoke of worry, yes, but also of resilience. The sun had lit her hair from behind, creating a halo of light around her head. He had made her look like a warrior. A tired warrior, perhaps, but a warrior nonetheless. She stared at the image, speechless. She had never seen herself like that before. When she looked in the mirror, she saw only worry and fatigue. But Liam saw strength. "That is how you see me," she whispered, unable to look away from the screen. "That is what is there," he said simply. She finally looked up at him, her heart full of an emotion so new and overwhelming she could not name it. He was not just a traveller passing through. He was something else. Someone who could look at the wreckage of her life and see the story, the beauty, the strength. She glanced at her watch. The hour was up. A little pang of sorrow went through her. The escape was over. Reality was waiting. "I have to get back," she said, her voice reluctant. "I know." They walked back to town in a comfortable, charged silence. The air between them had changed. The near kiss, the photograph, something had shifted, settled into place. When they reached the front door of the last page, with its cheerful blue paint and gleaming windows, it felt like returning from a long journey. "Thank you, Liam," she said, turning to face him, for getting me out of here, for the boatyard, for the picture, for seeing me. "Any time," he said, and his smile was genuine and warm. "I am going to be working around the town square for the rest of the afternoon if you know." He left the invitation hanging in the air, open and without pressure. "I will be here," she said, "among the invoices." He laughed, a rich, easy sound. "I will see you later, Elara." He gave her a small wave and walked away, his camera slung over his shoulder, leaving her standing alone on the doorstep. She unlocked the door, and the little bell chimed, welcoming her back to her life. The shop was exactly as she had left it. It was silent, still, and filled with the scent of paper and coffee. The cream-coloured envelope with its stark red warning was still on the counter, a silent accusation. But as Elara looked at it, a strange thing happened. The fear was still there, but it no longer had the power to paralyze her. It was just a piece of paper. She thought of the photo on Liam's camera, of the resolute woman with the sun in her hair. She was still that person. That person was stronger than a bill. She picked up the envelope, her hand steady. She still did not have a solution. She still did not know what she was going to do. But as she stood there in her quiet, beloved bookshop, she felt a flicker of hope that was stronger and more stubborn than before. She was roots, holding on under pressure. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was holding on alone. Back inside the last page, the silence was a blank canvas. Before, it had been painted with loneliness and anxiety. Now Elara felt the ghost of Liam's presence in the air, a warmth that lingered like the phantom heat of the sun. The menacing cream-coloured envelope was still on the counter where she had left it. She picked it up, her fingers steady. The stark red letters, final notice, seemed less like a verdict and more like a challenge. She thought of the photograph, of the woman with the wind in her hair and resolve in her eyes. That woman would not just stare at a problem until it swallowed her whole. That woman would act. Taking a deep breath, Elara walked to the small, cluttered office in the back of the shop. She sat down in the creaking swivel chair that had been her grandfather's and pulled the old rotary phone towards her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. But she ignored it. She dialed the number for the county tax office listed on the notice. The voice on the other end was bored and bureaucratic. Elara explained her situation, her voice trembling at first, then gaining strength as she spoke. She did not make excuses. She stated the facts. Sales were down. She was the sole proprietor. She was trying to keep a legacy business afloat. She asked about payment plans, extensions, and any possible option. She was put on hold. The tinny music was a grating soundtrack to her suspense. She did not get a miracle. The woman returned to the line and informed her, in that same monotone, that she could apply for a temporary hardship deferment, but it would require extensive paperwork, and there was no guarantee of approval. The deadline to file was in 2 weeks. It was not a solution, but it was not a locked door either. It was a sliver of a chance, a narrow path through the woods, where before she had only seen a wall of trees. "Thank you," Elara said, and she meant it. "I will get the paperwork." After she hung up, she sat in the quiet office, a profound sense of relief washing over her. She had not fixed the problem, not by a long shot, but she had faced it. She had taken a step. It was the first truly proactive thing she had done about her financial crisis, and the small act of courage felt like a monumental victory. She owed that feeling, she realized, to the man who had shown her a picture of her own strength. The rest of the afternoon passed in a productive blur. Buoyed by her small success, Elara attacked the chores she had been dreading. She sorted a month's worth of invoices, updated the inventory, and even tackled the persistent drip near the poetry section with a bucket and a roll of waterproof tape. It was a temporary fix, but a fix nonetheless. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, golden fingers of light through the front window when the bell above the door chimed. Elara was perched on the rolling ladder, reshelving a heavy stack of history books. She looked down, her heart giving a familiar, happy lurch. Liam stood there, his camera hanging by its strap at his side. He had a small, triumphant smile on his face, and his eyes were bright with the creative energy that seemed to surround him like an aura. I hope you are not planning on recreating the book avalanche from yesterday, he said, his voice laced with amusement. I am a trained professional, she retorted, carefully sliding a biography of Churchill into its proper place. Besides, you were the bull in the china shop, if I recall. Fair enough. He walked further into the shop, his gaze sweeping over the now tidy counter and organized shelves. You have been busy. It is amazing what a little sunshine and a trip to a boat graveyard can do for motivation, she said, climbing down the last few rungs of the ladder. I am glad I could assist in your renewed sense of purpose, he said, his smile softening. He took a step closer. I wanted to show you something. He lifted his camera and turned the screen towards her. It was a photograph of the Port Blossom town square. He had taken it from an elevated angle, somehow managing to capture the clock tower, the central fountain, and the facade of Mrs. Gable's bakery all in one frame. But it was the light that was extraordinary. It was late afternoon, and the sun illuminated the scene with a warm, almost honeyed glow. A few children were chasing pigeons near the fountain, their forms caught in mid-motion, a blur of joyful energy. The photo made her familiar. Sleepy Town looked like a magical, timeless place. You make it look like a postcard from a perfect world, she said, her voice filled with wonder. It is a perfect world, he said quietly. You just have to be there at the right moment to see it. He lowered the camera. I was thinking. I have been eating alone at the diner for the past 2 nights. The food is fine, but the company leaves something to be desired. I was wondering if you would let me buy you dinner tonight to thank you for being my tour guide. The question was casual, but his eyes were not. They were fixed on hers, searching and sincere. Elara's mind screamed a list of reasons why she should say no. She was busy. She had paperwork to fill out. It was a bad idea to get attached to a man who was, by his own admission, just passing through. Her heart, however, was not listening to reason. It was saying one word, over and over again. Yes, yes, yes. I think I can be persuaded, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. But only if you promise to tell me the story behind one of your photographs. It is a deal, he said, his own smile widening. I will even let you pick which one. They decided to go to the Salty Dog, a small restaurant on the wharf that had been a Port Blossom institution for over 50 years. It was the kind of place with checkered tablecloths, mismatched wooden chairs, and the lingering, delicious scent of fried fish and garlic. The low-beamed ceiling and the nautical maps on the walls made it feel like the cosy galley of an old ship. They were shown to a small table by a window overlooking the harbour. The fishing boats were all docked for the evening, their lights bobbing gently on the dark, swelling water. The easy comfort they had found at the boatyard returned almost immediately. There were no awkward silences, no forced conversation. They talked as if they were picking up a conversation that had been going on for years. Okay, she said, after they had ordered. Your turn. The picture of the old man in the market, the one with all the wrinkles. Tell me his story. Liam leaned back in his chair, a reminiscent look in his eyes. That was in a small town in Tuscany. His name was Marco. He had been selling olives at the same stall in that market for 60 years. He started when he was a boy, helping his father. I watched him for almost an hour before I took that picture. The way he talked to everyone, knew all their names, their children's names. He would give little kids a free olive, just to see them smile. He was not just selling olives. He was the heart of that market. He was roots. He used her word, and he looked at her as he said it, a clear line being drawn between a 60-year-old olive farmer in Italy and a 28-year-old bookseller in Port Blossom. "Did you talk to him?" she asked. "I did. I bought some olives," Liam said with a smile. "I told him his face told a wonderful story, and he just laughed. He said, 'It is not my face. It is the sun and the work and my wife's good cooking.'" Elara laughed too, a genuine happy sound. "I like him." I did too. A shadow of something, wistfulness, perhaps, crossed his face. "That is the hardest part of what I do, finding these incredible people, these incredible places, and then leaving. Sometimes I feel like my whole life is a collection of beautiful goodbyes." The words hung in the air between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of his transient nature, of the inevitable end to their time together. "You could stay," Elara said, the words softer than she intended. "In a place. You could choose one." He looked out the window at the dark water. "I have never found one that felt right. Every time I start to feel settled, I get this itch, this feeling that there is something else I am supposed to see just over the next hill, that the best picture is still out there, waiting for me. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," she said. "You are a man with wings. My grandfather would have understood." "But what about you?" he asked, leaning forward, his voice earnest. "Have you ever wanted to fly, to see Tuscany, or the desert, to leave Port Blossom behind?" Elara considered the question. No one had ever asked her that before. It was always assumed she would stay, that the last page was her destiny. "I used to dream about it," she confessed. "When I was a teenager, I wanted to go to Paris. I wanted to sit in a cafe and read poetry and be someone completely different. But then my grandmother got sick, and my grandfather needed me here. And after he was gone, the shop needed me." She shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. "The wings I had just sort of folded up." "They are not gone," he said, his voice intense. "They are just waiting." Their food arrived, breaking the spell. They ate, and the conversation drifted to lighter things. Books, movies, the questionable quality of Mrs. Gable's coffee. Liam was funny, self-deprecating, and an incredible listener. Elara found herself talking more than she had in years, sharing stories about her grandfather, about the quirky regulars at the shop, about her own quiet life. She felt interesting. She felt seen. After dinner, they walked back towards the main street. A cool, salty breeze was blowing in off the ocean, and the sky was a deep, velvety blue, studded with a million tiny, brilliant stars. The town was quiet, the shops dark. It felt like they had the whole world to themselves. They stopped in front of the last page. The warm light from the single lamp she had left on inside spilled out onto the sidewalk, illuminating the display of books in the bay window. It looked welcoming, magical. It looked like home. "I had a really wonderful time tonight, Liam," she said, turning to face him. "Me too," he said. His voice was low and husky. He was not looking at the shop. He was looking at her. He took a step closer, and the playful, friendly energy between them was suddenly gone, replaced by the same potent, charged silence they had shared at the boatyard. This time, there was no camera to hide behind. There were no wrecked ships, only the two of them, standing in a pool of golden light on a quiet, starry night. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek, his fingers lingering on her skin for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. The touch was electric, sending a shiver all the way down to her toes. "Elara," he whispered, and her name was a question, a plea, a promise. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. This was it. This was the moment she had been replaying in her mind since he had first walked out of the rain. Her heart was beating a wild, joyful rhythm. And then his phone buzzed. The sound was jarringly loud in the quiet night. It buzzed again, insistent. Liam flinched, pulling his hand back as if he had been burned. A frustrated sigh escaped his lips. "I am sorry," he muttered, reaching into his pocket. "I should have turned this off." He glanced at the screen, and his entire posture changed. The soft, romantic haze around him evaporated, replaced by a sharp, focused attention. He frowned. "Is everything okay?" Elara asked, the magical bubble around them rapidly deflating. "I do not know," he said, his eyes still glued to the screen. "It is an editor from Wanderer magazine. I sent them a portfolio months ago. I never thought." His voice trailed off as he answered the call. "Mark." "Yeah, it is me." He turned slightly away from Elara, creating an unconscious wall between them. "No, now is fine. What is up?" Elara stood there, wrapping her arms around herself, as the night air suddenly felt much colder. She could not hear the other side of the conversation, but she could see it on Liam's face. His eyes widened, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief, and then to a raw, undeniable excitement. "Are you serious?" he said into the phone, a grin spreading across his face. "Patagonia. For how long?" Elara's heart sank. Patagonia. It sounded like the end of the world. There was a pause. Liam ran a hand through his hair, his back still mostly to her. 3 months. Wow. Yeah. No, of course I am interested. When would you need me to leave? He fell silent again, listening. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Elara felt like she was turning to stone on the sidewalk. Patagonia. 3 months. He was a man with wings, and he had just been offered the sky. He finally turned back to her, the phone still pressed to his ear. His eyes, which moments ago had been filled with warmth for her, were now alight with the thrill of a new horizon. He looked at her, and the excitement in his face faltered slightly as he saw her expression. He saw the fallen hope, the wall she was already rebuilding around her heart. Can I call you back?" he said into the phone, his gaze locked on Elara. "Yeah. In 5 minutes." "Okay." He hung up, the silence rushing back in, heavier and more oppressive than ever before. "Elara," he started, taking a step towards her. But she held up a hand, stopping him. The single word he spoke, her name, had been a promise just minutes ago. Now, it felt like a goodbye. The silence that fell between them was a chasm, deep and absolute. The starlight seemed to dim, the warm glow from the bookshop window suddenly cold and clinical. Liam stood with his phone in his hand, the screen dark, but it felt to Elara like a humming, malevolent thing. It was a portal to a world she could not enter, a world of faraway places and limitless horizons, a world that would always be more alluring than her small, quiet life. Elara, he began again, his voice strained, stripped of its earlier warmth. He took a half step towards her, his hand reaching out, then falling back to his side. This is the call I have been waiting for my whole life. She looked at him, at his face, which was a warring canvas of exhilaration and distress. He was trying to manage her feelings, she realized, while his own was soaring towards the snow-capped peaks of Patagonia. The thought was like a shard of ice in her chest. "You should call him back," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. She had found a switch inside herself and flipped it, plunging everything into a protective darkness. "He is waiting." "Not until we talk about this," he insisted, his frustration evident. "Do not just shut down, please." A bitter laugh almost escaped her lips. Shut down. It was the only thing she knew how to do. It was her primary defense mechanism, the walls of the fortress she had built around her heart. He had breached them so easily, and now she was scrambling to put the stones back in place. "There is nothing to talk about," she said, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. "This is who you are. You told me yourself. You chase the light. Patagonia has a lot of light, I imagine." She looked away from him, at the reflection of the street in the darkened shop window. She saw two figures, one poised for flight, the other rooted to the spot. "And this is not real?" he demanded, his voice rising with disbelief. "What happened tonight? What happened at the boatyard? Was that just nothing?" "It was a lovely 2 days," she said, and the coldness in her own voice scared her. "You are a very charming tourist. You took some beautiful pictures, I am sure. You will have a wonderful new story to add to your collection." "A story?" He stepped in front of her, forcing her to meet his gaze. His sea-glass eyes were stormy now, filled with hurt and anger. "That is what you think this is? I have spent years on the road, Elara. I know the difference between a passing story and something else. Something real. And what is this, Liam? What is this something real?" The questions poured out of her now, fueled by the pain of the beautiful, impossible moment he had just shattered. A near kiss on a sidewalk. A dinner. What were you offering me? 5 minutes before your dream called. Another week. Another month. And then what? A postcard from Patagonia. A pretty photo of a glacier with "Wish you were here" scrawled on the back. The colour drained from his face. That is not fair. Fair. The switch inside her flipped back, and a hot, wild grief surged through her. Fair is the last thing my life has been lately. I am standing here, drowning in debt, about to lose the only thing my family ever built, the only thing I have left of my grandfather. And I let you, a man with no attachments and an exit strategy built into his DNA, make me feel hopeful. I let you take a picture of me and convince me I was strong. And for a few hours, I actually believed it. I was a fool. Her voice broke on the last word, and she hated herself for the weakness. She turned away, but he caught her arm gently, his touch still sending an unwanted jolt through her. "Do not," he said, his voice low and pleading. "Do not do that. You are strong. That has nothing to do with me. And being hopeful is not foolish. It is when you place it in something that is already gone." She shot back, pulling her arm from his grasp. "You are already gone, Liam. Your heart, your head, they are already in South America. Just be honest about it. I can be excited about my work and still care about you," he argued, his hands clenched at his sides. "The two things are not mutually exclusive. Why do they have to be? Because your work is leaving. It is, by its very nature, the opposite of staying. And I am, by my very nature, the opposite of leaving," she cried, gesturing wildly at the bookshop behind her. "This is my reality. I do not have the luxury of chasing sunsets. I have invoices to pay and a roof that leaks and a final notice from the tax office that I have 2 weeks to deal with before they lock these doors for good." The confession tumbled out, the full, ugly weight of it. She had not meant to tell him, had not wanted his pity. But she needed him to understand the chasm between their worlds. It was not just a matter of preference. It was a matter of possibility. He stared at her, stunned into silence. The anger in his face softened, replaced by a deep, aching sympathy that was somehow worse. "Why did not you tell me it was that bad?" he asked quietly. "Because it is not your problem to solve," she said, her voice weary. "My problems are roots. They hold me here. Your dreams are wings. They pull you away. It is that simple." "It is not that simple," he insisted, stepping closer again. "We can figure it out. 3 months is not forever. I will be back. We can write, we can call." It was the exact thing she had predicted, the exact hollow promise she could not bear to hear. "No," she said, shaking her head, a tear finally escaping and tracing a hot path down her cold cheek. Do not cheapen what this was by turning it into a long-distance fantasy. You told me your life was a series of beautiful goodbyes. So let this be one. Be good at it." He looked utterly lost, as if she were speaking a language he could not comprehend. He, who made his living from observing the world, could not seem to see the truth of what was right in front of him. He wanted everything. He wanted the world, and he wanted her in it, waiting patiently for him to come back and visit. "So that is it?" he asked, his voice rough with disbelief. "You are just giving up on this, on us?" "There is no us to give up on," she said, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "There was just a man and a woman who had a nice dinner, and now the man has a plane to catch." She took a deep breath, gathering the last of her strength. "Go, Liam. Go to Patagonia. It is the opportunity of a lifetime. You cannot miss it. You should not miss it." She was making the choice for him, pushing him out the door, because it was less painful than watching him walk out on his own. He searched her face for a long, agonizing moment, looking for a crack in her resolve, a flicker of doubt. But she gave him nothing. She held her expression as still as a photograph, a portrait of a woman she did not recognize, a woman made of ice and stone. Finally he nodded. a sharp, defeated movement. The fight went out of him, replaced by a cold resignation that mirrored her own. "Fine," he said, his voice clipped. "If that is what you want." He did not say goodbye. He just turned and walked away. His footsteps were loud on the quiet street, each one a hammer blow against her fragile heart. She watched until his silhouette was swallowed by the darkness. The moment he was gone, the stone woman crumbled. A ragged sob tore from Elara's throat, and she leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the shop door. The bell inside remained silent. She was locked out of her own sanctuary. Her body shook with the force of her weeping, for the hope that had been born and had died in the space of a single day, for the beautiful, impossible man with the wings of a traveller and the eyes of a poet. After a long time, her tears subsided, leaving her hollowed out and shivering. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the lock. She stepped inside, the little bell chiming a mocking welcome. The shop, her refuge, felt different now. It felt like a cage. The scent of old paper and coffee, usually so comforting, seemed to smell of dust and loneliness. She walked back to her office and sank into her grandfather's chair. The paperwork for the tax deferment sat on the edge of her desk, a stark white rectangle in the dim light. It was a symbol of the courage he had given her. Now, it just looked like another impossible task, another link in the chain that bound her to this place. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Liam walked into his sterile hotel room. The excitement of the phone call had completely curdled, leaving a sour taste in his mouth. Patagonia. The word that had sounded like a symphony an hour ago now just sounded like a place that was very, very far away from Elara. He took out his camera and scrolled through the day's photos. Home, the weathered wood of the boats, the golden light on the town square. And then, her. He stopped at the photo he had shown her, the one of her looking out at the sea, the sun creating a halo in her hair. He had seen strength in her and resilience. But now, looking at the image, he saw something else. He saw the profound loneliness she carried, the weight of the world on her slender shoulders. He saw the flicker of a dream in her eyes, a dream of the horizon she was always looking at but never moving towards. He had told her that roots were strongest under pressure, but he had not considered that even the strongest roots can break. He pulled his phone from his pocket. The editor's number was still on the screen. His thumb hovered over the call button. This was it, the culmination of everything he had worked for. A feature in Wanderer would change his career and open every door. It was the ultimate freedom and the validation he had sought for years. He thought of Elara's face, streaked with tears, as she told him to go. Do not cheapen what this was. She had not been pushing him away out of anger. She had been trying to protect herself from a hurt she saw as inevitable. She had given him an out because she did not believe for a second that he would ever choose to stay. And the terrible, gut-wrenching truth was, she was right. He was not going to stay. The wings on his back were beating too hard. The call of the wild was too loud. With a heavy heart and a sense of profound loss, he pressed the button. "Mark," he said when the editor picked up. "It is Liam. I am in," as he made arrangements for flights and equipment. He looked at the photograph of Elara one last time. He had captured her story, frozen it in time. However, He had just written himself out of the next chapter. He was a man who collected beautiful goodbyes, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this one would haunt him the most. 3 months can be an eternity, or the blink of an eye. For Elara, it had been both. The autumn that followed Liam's departure had arrived with a crisp, decisive chill, painting the leaves on the trees in the town square in fiery shades of crimson and gold. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth, a scent of endings and new beginnings. Inside the last page, something remarkable had happened. The oppressive silence had been replaced by a low, steady hum of activity. After a week of hollow grief following Liam's departure, Elara had looked at the photograph he had left her, a print he had slipped under the door the morning he left, and saw not the woman he had abandoned, but the warrior he had revealed. That woman would not let her grandfather's legacy crumble into dust. Fueled by a desperate, defiant energy, she had acted. She filled out the tax deferment paperwork, her hand steady and her purpose clear. However, she knew it was only a temporary reprieve. She needed a real solution. The idea came to her one quiet afternoon, inspired by Liam's words. Stories everywhere. Her shop was not just a place that sold stories. It could be a place that created them. She started small. She cleared a space in the back, set up a few mismatched chairs, and put a sign in the window. Story night. Every Friday. Share a tale. All are welcome. The first night, only 5 people showed up, including a bewildered Mrs. Gable who thought it was a book club. But Elara read a passage from one of her grandfather's favourite books, and a shy fisherman told a rambling, beautiful story about his first catch. By the 3rd week, the space was full. People came to listen, to share, to connect. It became the heart of the town's quiet social life. From there, the ideas flowed. She started a writer's workshop on Saturday mornings. She partnered with the local school for an after-school reading hour. She used the small printing press in the back to create beautiful note cards and bookmarks featuring quotes about the sea, which sold surprisingly well. Each new initiative was a small stream of income, but together they formed a river. She was not just surviving anymore. The last page was thriving. It was breathing again. And so was she. She still thought of Liam every day. His absence was a phantom limb, an ache that sharpened in quiet moments. She wondered where he was, what mountains he was climbing, what light he was chasing. She hoped he was happy. She had accepted that their story was a short one, a beautiful, painful prologue to the rest of her life. One Friday evening in late October, the shop was buzzing. It was story night, and the theme was ghosts of the sea. The air was warm and smelled of fresh coffee and old paper. Elara was behind the counter, laughing at something the town's mayor was saying, when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up, a welcoming smile on her face, ready to greet another neighbour. And the world stopped. It was him. Liam stood just inside the doorway, looking both exactly the same and completely different. He was thinner, his face tanned by a wind she could not imagine, his hair longer. He wore a simple grey sweater and jeans, but he seemed to carry the immense, wild space of Patagonia in his posture. His sea-glass eyes, tired but clear, scanned the crowded, vibrant room with a look of stunned wonder. Then they found hers. The laughter died in Elara's throat. Her heart, which had been beating so steadily for months, gave a violent, painful lurch. It was as if a ghost had walked in, not from the sea, but from a life she had packed away and stored in the attic of her memory. The hum of conversation in the room faded to a distant buzz. For a long, breathless moment, they just stared at each other across the crowded shop. Liam took a hesitant step forward, then another. He moved through the small crowd like a man in a dream, his eyes never leaving hers. People turned to look at him. This stranger who had so completely captured the attention of their beloved bookseller. He stopped in front of the counter. The space between them felt like a mile-wide canyon, filled with unspoken words and 3 months of silence. "Hi," he said. His voice was husky, rougher than she remembered. "Hi," she whispered back. Her hands were gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles were white. What are you doing here? I thought you were in Patagonia." "My assignment ended," he said. "I flew out yesterday." "Oh." 1,000 questions swirled in her mind. "Why are you here? Are you just passing through? Are you going to break my heart all over again?" But she could not ask any of them. He looked around the shop again, at the circle of people listening to a story, at the new displays, at the vibrant life that filled every corner. "You did it," he said, his voice soft with awe. "You saved it." "I did," she said, and a flicker of the pride she had earned over the past months warmed her. "It turns out roots are pretty strong." "The strongest," he agreed. A pained expression crossed his face. "Elara, I was wrong. About everything." Before she could respond, Mrs. Gable bustled over, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Elara, dear, who is your friend?" Liam turned his head slightly, giving the older woman a polite, tired smile. "Liam Kent," he said. "I am just a traveller." He turned back to Elara, and the look in his eyes said the words were a lie he was no longer willing to live. Elara knew they could not have this conversation here, surrounded by the curious, well-meaning eyes of her entire town. "Can you wait?" she asked him, her voice low. "Until I close up?" He nodded without hesitation. "I will wait as long as you want." He found an empty stool in a far corner and sat, an island of stillness in the gentle current of the room. For the next hour, Elara went through the motions of hosting story night. She refilled coffee cups, laughed at the right moments, and thanked everyone for coming. However, she was intensely aware of him, of his gaze on her, and of his patient, silent presence. It was a torture and a comfort all at once. Finally, the last person had gone, their goodbyes echoing in the now quiet space. Elara locked the door and turned the sign to closed. She turned to face him. The shop was lit by a single warm lamp on the counter, the same lamp that had illuminated their disastrous goodbye. He stood up and walked towards her, stopping a few feet away. "I saw the most incredible things, Elara," he began, his voice quiet but intense. "Glaciers that were bluer than the sky, mountains that tore through the clouds. I took thousands of pictures, wanderers giving me the cover and a 20-page spread. It is everything I ever wanted." "I am happy for you, Liam," she said, and she meant it. "Do not be." he said, taking another step closer. Because I was miserable. I was standing in the most beautiful places on earth, completely, utterly alone. I kept thinking about what you said, that I was chasing light. And I was. But it was cold light. Empty light. There was no story in it that mattered. He reached into the canvas bag at his feet and pulled out a portfolio. He opened it on the counter. The pictures were breathtaking. Jagged, ice-covered peaks. Vast, empty plains under a sky filled with 1 billion stars. They were technically perfect, stunningly beautiful, and completely devoid of warmth. "This is my work," he said. "It is good. But it is not everything." He then reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a single, worn photograph, its edges softened from handling. It was the picture of her on the beach, looking out at the sea. "This," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is my heart." I looked at this picture every single day. I realized that the most important story I had ever found, I walked away from. I told you my life was a collection of beautiful goodbyes, but that was a coward's excuse. I was just afraid of finding a reason to stay. Tears were blurring Elara's vision. "Liam, I was wrong to ask you to wait for me," he continued, his eyes pleading with hers. "And you were wrong to push me away. We were both scared. But I am not scared anymore. I came back to ask you not to be another stop on my map. I came back to ask you to be my home." He reached across the counter and took her hands. They were cold, but his were warm. "I still want to see the world," he said. "But I want to see it with you. And I want to have a place to come back to. These past 3 months taught me something my grandfather tried to tell me years ago. Wings are useless if you do not have a place to land." A tear slipped down her cheek, and he gently wiped it away with his thumb. "I have set up a base here," he said. "I rented the small apartment above the bakery. I can still take assignments. But this, Port Blossom, this is where I want my roots to be." Elara looked at him, at the sincerity and love that shone from his tired eyes. The fortress around her heart did not just crumble. It vanished, as if it had never been there at all. She saw the truth. He was not asking her to give up her roots. He was offering to plant his own beside them. And he was offering her a chance to finally use her wings. "What about Paris?" he asked, a small, hopeful smile touching his lips. "I hear it is nice in the spring." A laugh, watery and full of relief, escaped her. "I hear it is." "So," he whispered, his face just inches from hers. "What do you say, Elara? Are you willing to start a new story with me?" She did not need to answer with words. She leaned across the counter, met him halfway, and kissed him. It was a kiss that held 3 months of longing, a world of regret, and a universe of hope. It was messy and salty with tears, but it was real. It was a kiss of homecoming. When they finally broke apart, they rested their foreheads against each other, breathing the same air. The little shop was silent, but it felt full, complete. "Welcome home, Liam," she whispered. He smiled, a real, brilliant smile that lit up his entire face. It is good to be home. He looked around the warm book-filled space that she had fought so hard for, his gaze finally landing on the sign for story night. So, he said, his eyes twinkling, does our story have a title? Elara looked at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The last page of her old life had been turned. She was standing on the first page of a new one. I think, she said, her voice bright with a happiness she had only dreamed of, it is just beginning.